Dr. Carrier, what is your best argument and evidence that Jesus never existed, considering it's a minority position?
Yeah, it's two things really that converge together. One is that we don't have any secular evidence for the historicity of Jesus. It's all mythological for the actual historical man. It all comes from myth. Usually when we look at people who, gods and heroes and so forth, whose principal mode of existence is in myth, they usually don't exist. So we need something more for Jesus than just he exists in these mythologies. And when we look at the earliest evidence, which is the letters of Paul, the authentic letters of Paul, a historical Jesus isn't really there in the normal sense. Now, he believes in a historical Jesus in the same sense as he believed in a historical Satan, right? But of course, we don't think Satan really existed. Satan is this celestial being that had a historical war with God and so forth. But of course, that's all imaginary. And when you read Paul without colored glasses, when you're not reading it with the dogmatic assumptions of the field, you find that there just is no historical earthly Jesus there. He only talks about a Jesus who is celestial, who only communicates through revelation. No one ever met him personally. And that's very conspicuous throughout across the letters. He says this multiple times. All of the stuff you'd expect him to talk about is not there. And so when you combine those two pieces of evidence, it makes a pretty strong case that there wasn't a Jesus. Now, of course, that leads to a whole bunch of but what abouts, but what about, and of course, that would get into a much longer video, but that's why I did the whole study, to actually go point by point by point. And I have a new book coming out called The Obsolete Paradigm of a Historical Jesus that really goes into this in more detail in terms of the attempts to rehabilitate the historical Jesus in the last 10 years since I published my last peer-reviewed study on it. And the case for Jesus is worse now than it was then. So
why don't scholars in general agree with you?
Yeah, well, first of all, most of them aren't even reading the studies, right? They're defending a dogma. They're not actually bothering to interact with the study itself. So the other part of it is that they're operating on a bunch of faith assumptions. Even when they're not believers, they have basically been taught and raised in these faith assumptions and keep just using them. I mean, to give an example, when I was in a debate with Mark Goodacre on this, and he's not like a fundamentalist or anything, he kept arguing that Paul says he learned the gospel from the apostles before him. But he never says that. And I kept pointing out, that's not in there. But he kept saying, yes, it is. I said, no, it's not. But he really did believe that there was somewhere in the letters of Paul that he said this, because this is a faith doctrine that just gets taught in the field, and they just believe that that's the case. There are many other aspects, many other arguments like this. The idea that the word crucifixion only ever referred to Roman crucifixion, which is false. But people believe it, and they just keep repeating it, and they're not checking